2025 is right around the corner, and it'll be the year for the 20th anniversary of the Deathnote manga. You guys seem to like the huge Berserk Iceberg we covered not too long ago, so why not start the 20th anniversary celebration of Deathnote early, and cover a decently sized iceberg chart that I created for all things Deathnote. This chart covers everything from lore, theories, rare and obscure merchandise, lost media, games and adaptations, real-life crimes, and much more. This is the definitive Deathnote Iceberg explained. Anime. Like all my other charts, we're gonna start off simple before getting to the darker and more obscure stuff. The Deathnote anime is an almost one-to-one adaptation of the manga and first aired in Japan in October 2006, then aired a year later in October 2007 in the States. The anime was produced by Studio Madhouse, which was a very reputable animation studio from even before animating Deathnote, as they've already produced projects such as Perfect Blue and Ninja Scroll in the 90s. The Deathnote anime ran for 37 episodes and was an immediate hit, especially in the States, as it aired on Adult Swim or Toonami every Saturday at midnight. The anime is often praised for its amazing voice acting and soundtrack, but one thing I think is overlooked is how well the animation holds up despite being over 17 years old now. Something I think just speaks to its greatness is the fact that Deathnote is a ton of people's first anime and is usually their gateway into more anime. I think this is because despite the manga being published by Shonen Jump, it doesn't follow the same formula and cliches of other anime and mangas of its time. It truly feels like a thriller that anyone can get into whether they're a fan of anime or not. The Death Note's first rule. The first rule of the Death Note reads, "The human whose name is written in this note shall die." This is the first thing most everyone will see after picking up the Death Note, including Light, who reads it right after picking it up for the first time. While there's several more rules that complicate things, this first rule is pretty rudimentary to the notebook and is the basis of the entire story. Kira. Kira is the name given by the public to the entity behind the heart attack killing epidemic. The word Kira, or Kira, is derived from the Japanese pronunciation of the English word killer. As Light begins to kill more and more with the Death Note, groups begin to show up that agree and worship his ideologies. These people are called Kira worshippers. There's several people who don the Kira title, as there's several users of the Death Note throughout the story, but Light Yagami is the first and most infamous Kira entity. God of the New World. This phrase, or rather title, is said several times throughout the series and refers to what Light calls himself as his plans come to fruition of creating a new world. Light, using the Death Note, intends to create a dystopian society where no criminals exist. Therefore, yes, he's playing God literally, but when Light calls himself this, it's more so a way to stroke his own ego, as there's much better ways to refer to himself in the new world than God. Shinigami. A Shinigami is a type of Japanese god that is related to all things death, or a god of death. The Shinigami in Death Note take inspiration from real-life Japanese religion and culture, but the Shinigami in Death Note are vastly different. In Death Note, Shinigami live in a separate realm than humans, called the Shinigami Realm, which is a gray, depressing, sand-filled land where most of the Shinigami lay dormant and bored. Each Shinigami has a personal Death Note, which they use to write the names of humans so they can extend their own lifespans. According to their rules, a Shinigami can't really interact with the human realm unless they obtain a second Death Note and drop it into the human realm. Then, a Shinigami must follow whoever picked up their Death Note until the owner dies or willingly gives the notebook's ownership up. There's several ways a Shinigami can interact with the human realm once they're in it, but more on that later. L. Low Light. L is the main antagonist of Death Note, and is the silly, goofy, cutie detective we all know and love. However, this entry is more focused on his name more than him as a character. Since you need a full name to kill someone using the Death Note, and L has erased all records of his full name, Light's main objective for more than half of the story is finding out L's real name so that he can get him out of the way and avoid being caught as Kira. Ironically, despite Light beating L, Light still never learns L's full name, as he manipulated Rem into writing L's name in her notebook. It's also never shown to the viewer in the manga or the anime what L's full name is, so one thing many fans look up after finishing the series is what is L's full name. Luckily enough, in the official guidebook called Volume 13 How to Read, L's full name is revealed to be L Lowlight. Apples. Apples are a common item found throughout the series, most notably being Ryuk's favorite food. While Shinigami don't need food to survive, Ryuk claims apples to him are like cigarettes or alcohol to humans. We even see him having withdrawal symptoms when he can't have apples for a bit. He especially likes the apples from the human world, as the apples in the Shinigami realm are shriveled and full of sand. You can make pretty clear connections between the religious symbolism of apples and the apples used in Death Note, as apples are a symbol of temptation and sin. However, the creator of Death Note, Tasumi Oba, claimed that he chose to include apples because he thought their red color looked good when contrasted with Ryuk's black design. L sitting pose. One of the most noticeable quirky character traits of L is the way he sits. Every character that comes into contact with him makes a remark about his posture, and L provides the same excuse to all of them, claiming it increases his deductive skills by 40%. He never elaborates on how he got to that number, and we don't know if it's actually true, but many people have theories on whether or not it helps when studying or thinking. I'm writing this video while sitting in the L pose, and I feel just as stupid as before, so I guess it doesn't work for me. Deathnote original soundtrack. The original soundtrack was created for the anime and consists of 64 tracks total. Composers Yoshihisa Hirano and Hideki Taniyuchi split the work on the soundtrack, with each composer arranging a different half of the total soundtrack. While each adaptation has a different soundtrack with new composers, nothing is as iconic as the anime's original soundtrack. Tracks like Boredom, Secrets, and Death Note are some really well-composed pieces that set the mood for the series really well. However, what's really special about the soundtrack is the character themes. L, Light, and Nier's themes are all iconic pieces that are still tied in with meme culture to this day. Nothing beats Rem's theme for me though. Oba and Obata. Tsugumi Oba and Takeshi Obata are the two creators of the original Death Note manga, Oba being the main writer and Obata being the artist and secondary writer. While a lot is known about Obata, as he already had a good reputation in the manga space for working on a series called Hikaru no Go, little was or is still known about Oba, as he's a faceless manga artist. Many people theorize about Oba's true identity, using clues that he's scattered throughout interviews and his work. The duo of Obata and Oba would go on a few years after Death Note finished and create Bakuman, which is a manga series about an inspiring author and illustrator duo. Bakuman went on to be pretty successful, selling over 15 million copies, which I'm sure some of this was due to the duo's recent success with Death Note. Japanese live action. There are now 5 total live action adaptations for Death Note in Japanese media, 4 of them being movies and 1 of them being a TV series, all of them being part of the same universe. It's sort of like a Death Note cinematic universe. 3 of the movies are a 3-part trilogy, tightly following the events of the beginning of the manga, but at about the halfway point, they start to stray away from the source material, creating an entirely new ending. The 3rd movie in the trilogy is a completely new story set 10 years after the events of Death Note and introduces a ton of new original characters. The 4th movie is a spin-off movie called L Change the World and is an original side story involving L. The TV series is a 3-episode miniseries and helps bridge the gap between the 2nd and 3rd movie in the main trilogy and explains what happened between the 10-year time skip. I've never watched any of these movies, but I've only heard good things, especially for the first 2 movies, as the lead actors are praised for their portrayal of Light and L. Another thing that's pretty neat is the anime English dub cast reprised their roles for the English dub of most of these live actions, so it gives it more of a familiar feel. Netflix movie. Moving on to a not so praised adaptation, the Death Note Netflix movie is a live action movie released in 2017, specifically released on Netflix. The movie was directed by Adam Wingard, who just a year prior directed the 2016 Blair Witch Project, which also was not very good. The movie is a very loose retelling of the Death Note story, but set in America, complete with American versions of all our favorite characters, such as Light Turner, and Mia Sutton. Since it's in movie format, they had to fit the entire story in a 2-hour window, which led to the pacing being extremely fast. This caused the movie to scrap the cat and mouse style game between Light and L. Come to think of it, even if the movie was 6 hours long, it wouldn't matter because the characters are so stupid and poorly written that the clever scenes in cat and mouse game between Light and L could never work in this retelling. While a ton of changes are made to the characters, the biggest front to God is how dumbed down the characters are. In Light and L's first confrontation, Light straight up admits to being Kira after even being slightly pressed by L. I can make an entire video on how poorly made the movie is, but I gotta move on before I get too heated. 2019 one-shot. The A Kira story is a Death Note sequel chapter created by Oba and Obata and first teased in 2019 before fully releasing in Japan in February 2021. It was then re-released a year later in the Death Note Short Stories book, which is a book full of different Death Note related one-shots and stories. The A Kira story is a direct continuation of the original story and is mostly considered to be canon. The story picks up 10 years after the original ended and follows Ryuk as he returns to the human world once again in an attempt to ease his boredom. Ryuk gives his Death Note to the top scoring student in Japan, hoping he will give him the same entertainment that Light did. We get to see a few characters from the original series and we learn a bit more about the Shinigami realm and how the Death Note works, but I won't spoil any more about the one shot as you should definitely give it a read if you're a fan of the series. Religion. This very vague entry refers to the many religious undertones and symbolism presented throughout the series. Death Note most heavily takes direct influence from Catholicism and Christianity, both in its themes and overall aesthetics. We already spoke briefly on the correlation of apples in Death Note and Christianity, but things like the idea of justice, crows, doves, and the afterlife are all pieces of Death Note that took influence from Christian beliefs and lore. A ton of the official art and opening scene art also takes direct influence from some of the most important paintings and sculptures surrounding Christianity. Even an entire scene in the anime is supposed to be a retelling of an event from the New Testament, but we'll get to that in a bit. Death Note 13, How to Read. Death Note, How to Read, or Death Note Volume 13, is an encyclopedia-style guide to the manga that was released a bit after the manga concluded. The guide includes information about character bios, storyline summaries, interviews with Oba and Obata, production commentary, and much more. Unlike other manga guides, the Death Note How to Read guide is an official canon guide written by the series creators and is a useful tool for lore discussions. This entry refers to a scene from episode 36 of the anime that has become a pretty popular meme over the years. The scene is when Mikami is aggressively writing names in his Death Note while crazily shouting "delete" over and over again. The anime has to make up for the series' lack of action by making the use of the Death Note seem super dramatic and engaging, even though in reality it is just writing stuff down in a notebook.
I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
Ironically, this is another Death Note meme that spawned from the over-dramatization of a mundane task from the anime. The meme comes from episode 8 of the anime, when Light is using a small TV hidden in a chip bag to write the names of criminals in the Death Note, while his every move is watched via cameras in his room. Light in his inner monologue says,
Just watch me, L. I'll solve equations with my right hand and write names with my left. I'll take a potato chip and eat it.
The over-the-top narration and animation led to a ton of memes over the years and is still something that's referenced in the community today. Death Note novels. There are currently 2 Death Note novels released, both being spin-offs, with one being not canon and one maybe being canon. The first is a prequel story called Death Note Another Note, The Los Angeles BB Murder Cases, and follows the story of L and Naomi Misora as they solve the BB serial murder cases, which was mentioned earlier on in the anime and manga. The second novel, called L Changed the World, is an adaptation of the previously mentioned Japanese live-action film of the same name. Both of these novels are not written by Oba, and while Change the World is obviously not canon, it's argued whether or not the Los Angeles BB Murder Cases novel is canon or not. Anime alternate ending. This entry is more of a blanket entry for the Deathnote relights, but also covers a possible alternate ending. The Deathnote relights are a 2-part film special that is basically a condensed director's cut of the anime. There are some original scenes exclusive to the relight that are very interesting, and you can find a compilation of them on YouTube if you've never seen it. One newly added scene in particular that has sparked many fan theories and speculation is a scene that occurs in the very beginning of the relight. The scene takes place after the events of Death Note and consists of an unnamed Shinigami approaching Ryuk and offering him an apple in exchange for information about the human realm. This sets up Ryuk to tell the story about Light Yagami and starts the relight essentially. At the end of the first relight, we cut back to the unnamed Shinigami, who leaves before Ryuk can finish the story, supposedly leaving to go to the human realm. This scene has sparked many theories revolving around the unnamed Shinigami's identity, with many claiming that this Shinigami is Light, and this is an alternate ending to the anime. Light XL. Death Note is a series that released in the mid-2000s when the internet was in its most Wild West era. With a huge wave of pre-existing and newer fanfiction sites gaining popularity, it wasn't too hard to find Light and L fanfiction on the internet at this time. While yes, people will ship any 2 characters from a series, it also really didn't help that Light and L had a slight homoerotic undertone in some scenes. Light and L were always destined to be abused by the Wattpad fanfiction community. Real Death Note notebooks. Shortly after the series started gaining popularity, a ton of real-life Death Note notebooks started to show up everywhere. Some of them being fan-made, but it wasn't too long before official merchandise of real Death Notes were being churned out everywhere. I mean, when you think about it, it's such an easy come-up. The series' most iconic item is an almost plain black notebook. That's like easy money right there. These real-life Death Notes would cause a ton of controversy and would be linked to actual crimes, but more on that later. Shinigami Eyes. Shinigami eyes refer to the actual eyes of a Shinigami and the powers that come with them. With the eyes, you're allowed to see a human's name and lifespan floating above their head just by looking at them. A human can obtain these eyes by making a deal with any Shinigami, the deal being that the human gives half of their remaining lifespan to the Shinigami in exchange for the eyes. The anime and other adaptations depict the eyes as being red or yellow, although this is just for style, as other humans cannot see when someone has Shinigami eyes. American names. When the manga or anime shows off the inside of the Death Note and we're able to see the long list of names written, if you pause and actually read the names, you'll see some pretty interesting things. All of the American names are in complete gibberish, with some of them being really goofy. The reason behind this is because Oba was worried that if he used real names, that people could get upset if they saw their name in the Death Note. Death Note really fell off after Jigen's Keith died. Misa's ending speculation. This entry refers to the long-standing speculation behind what was the true conclusion for Misa's character. Both the anime and manga have different final scenes for Misa, but neither of them give us a clear answer to what happened to her. Oba stated that he's leaving it up for fan speculation, although in the Death Note How to Read guide, he states that she likely committed, which is also the leading thought shared amongst fans. Rooftop scene in episode 25. The rooftop scene in episode 25, and the scene right after it, is an anime-only scene that is one of the most infamous and emotionally charged scenes in the entire anime. Upon hearing the church bells louder than usual, L finds himself standing in the rain on the roof of Task Force HQ. Light comes up to confront him, in which we get a rare moment of L opening up to Light vaguely about his upcoming possible death. While Light is still playing his fake innocent act, L throws one last Hail Mary and says something very bluntly to Light for the first time in the series.
Tell me, Light, from the moment you were born, has there ever been a point where you've actually told the truth?
Where's this coming from, Ryuzaki? I do admit I stretch the truth here and there. However, find me one person in this world who's never had to tell a lie. It wouldn't be easy. Human beings just aren't made to be perfect like that. Everybody lies from time to time. Even so, I've always made a conscious effort to be careful not to tell a lie that could hurt others.
Light responds with a straight ChatGPT response, which causes L to just give up and go back inside with Light. Once inside, in another anime-only scene, L rubs Light's feet dry with a cloth on the stairs. There are many different ways to interpret this scene. Some believe this is an act of humility and defeat in L's case, as while he's doing this he says, "It'll be lonely, won't it? We'll be parting ways soon," acknowledging his own defeat that comes later in the episode. Others believe this is still an act of defeat, but in a more mockery tone, as while L's drying Light's feet, he says, "This is the least I can do to atone for my sins," ridiculing Light's god complex in a way. Whichever way you interpret this scene, you cannot ignore the religious undertones of it, as it's an almost exact parallel to when Jesus cleaned Judas's feet in the Bible before Judas betrayed him. Capoeira. Capoeira is a Brazilian martial arts style that blends dance, acrobatics, and many different kicks. In the BB Murder Cases novel, Naomi uses capoeira to defend herself, which prompts her to tell Elle about it. Elle begins to take an interest in this, and is seen practicing capoeira again later in the novel. In the anime, when we see a handcuffed Light and Elle fight each other, Elle is fighting in a style very similar to capoeira, which would make a lot of sense, especially if the novel is canon. Matsuda is on Kira's side. Several times throughout the series, Matsuda is shown playing a soft devil's advocate role when discussing Kira. While his sense of justice is still strong, and he knows he must catch Kira, he can't help but see Kira's side, especially after the time skip. Matsuda points out the world statistics of crime rate and war dropping significantly under Kira's control, and starts to get upset because of his accepting attitude towards Kira. While this might be a little worrying if you're on a team actively fighting against Kira, it's not too damning of an issue for Matsuda, because he's still the first one to shoot Light after finding out he's Kira.
Matsuda, you idiot!
Jump Force. Jump Force is an anime fighting game released in 2019 and features many different playable characters from different anime series. Light and Ryuk are both featured in the game, however they're the only two non-playable characters in the game, sadly. Light and Ryuk instead are story character NPCs that help move the narrative. We coulda had Goku versus Light. Early Ryuk design. In the Deathnote How to Read guide, Oba states in an interview that he had a completely different design for Ryuk initially. He stated he wanted Ryuk to look like a young man, similar to Light, but with black hair and wings. He ended up not going along with this idea because it would have been too distracting, and could have made Ryuk seem like the protagonist over Light. An image I constantly see associated with this early design is this image. While this was drawn by Takeshi Obata, it's just an illustration from his art book and isn't claimed to be the early design of Ryuk, although I guess it's a good reference for what it could have looked like. Lazy second half. This entry refers to the fan and critic perception of the series' second half, or the Near and Mellow arc. It's almost unanimously agreed upon that the series falls off for a bit after episode 25, as this was the huge conclusion to the first 25 episodes of build-up. A lot of people were torn on the introduction of Near and Mellow as new antagonists, as many people felt they were a lazy attempt to mimic and recreate what made the first half so special. L is very popular with first-time viewers of the series, so once he's taken away, it's not surprising to see people lose some interest. Another thing is the anime rushed and cut a ton of content from the manga during the second arc, which could attribute to the lazy or bad allegations. Dark Watari. This entry refers to the dark, unexplained side we see of Watari's character. Despite being an almost snobby-looking clean rich old man, we see Watari do some pretty crazy things out of nowhere. In the helicopter scene, we can see Watari straight kitted out with a sniper hanging out of the helicopter. We also see Watari torture Misa with several different methods when L requests him to. It makes you wonder if Watari had a military past or something similar to it. Primaniac's perfume. Primaniacs is a perfume and cologne brand from Japan that makes special scents related to anime and manga characters. Primaniacs released a Deathnote set not too long ago, which is still up for sale on their site as of me recording this. The set includes Light, Ryuk, L, Misa, Near, and Mellow, and if you're dying to know what Ryuk smells like, it's apple and mimosa. Deathnote the Musical. Deathnote the Musical is a musical adaptation of Deathnote being created in 2014 by Frank Wildhorn and Jack Murphy. The musical changes several things from the source, especially the ending, but people don't seem to mind as it's surprisingly a good rendition of the story. One thing it obviously struggles with is fast pacing, as Deathnote isn't really a story you can tell in a 120-minute window. Even if you aren't into musicals, you should still check it out as the story, costumes, and acting are all really cool depictions of the original. Light Corset. In the manga, when Light is speaking with Ryuk about giving up ownership of the Death Note, he mentions briefly that he can wear a corset to discreetly bind the Death Note to his body. While this is never actually shown, the internet went rampant with this idea and created tons of fan art of Light wearing a corset. I can't even show most of these, but you get the idea. Banned in several countries. Several countries have banned both the Death Note anime and manga for several different reasons. Some of the notable ones being China, Russia, and South Korea, with all three of these countries banning Death Note for pretty much the same reason though. They all believe Death Note has a negative impact on the youth's psyche with its many themes of violence and manipulation. These countries have direct sales embargo on Death Note merchandising as well, with Russia even confiscating Death Note paraphernalia in some cases. We'll get to some major cases that caused these bans in just a bit. Death Parade Light. Death Parade is an anime released in 2015 and was created by a producer from Studio Madhouse, which was the animation studio behind Death Note. In episode 11 of Death Parade, you can see a man who looks very similar to Light sitting in a bar that is supposed to represent purgatory. The man is only in a couple shots and we never see any more from him. Despite it obviously just being a small reference to Death Note, many people made fan theories on how Death Parade and Death Note could be within the same universe and this is Light after he dies. Hakari Yagami. Hakari Yagami is a character from the Japanese live-action film Death Note Light Up the New World. He is Light Yagami's son, and despite only being 8 or 9 in the movie, he is the owner of a Death Note. He was conceived in secrecy with no one knowing the real mother, and it was hoped by Light that he would take over the Kira mantle after he died. Mikami is the guardian of Hakari, which obviously doesn't lead to Hakari being very mentally stable, and it causes Hakari to be easily corrupted by the Death Note. The film chooses to never really show what Hakari looks like, and we can only see him slightly as a baby in flashback scenes. I won't spoil what happens in the story, but it is pretty crazy. Full Metal Panic: The Second Raid. Full Metal Panic: The Second Raid is the second season to the Full Metal Panic anime, which released in 2005. The animation studio behind Full Metal Panic, Kyoto Animation, was originally going to animate Death Note, but was passed up on in favor of Studio Madhouse. In the 6th episode of the second raid, a shot is quickly shown of the entrance of a building. In front of the building, we can see a group of people who look to be L, Light, Soichiro, and Misa. This cameo is a pretty neat way to see what the characters would look like if Kyoto ended up animating Death Note, although I don't like L being tan. DS games. There are 3 Death Note games released for DS, with all 3 releasing in 2007 to 2008 only in Japan. The first being called Death Note Kira Game, and is a text-based strategy game where you can choose between 19 characters, then pick a role between Kira or L. You have to use the trust or suspicion mechanics for your corresponding role in order to find out who is Kira, or if you're on the Kira side, clear your name as Kira. The second game released was Death Note Successors to L, and is roughly the same as the first one where you choose a character, then choose a role of Kira or L, although this game is in more of a board game format. The third and final game released was L, the prologue to Death Note, Spiraling Trap. This game is the most interesting as it's an entirely new story set before the events of Death Note. You play as a rookie FBI agent that you name and create, and you must solve the case of several murders taking place on a mysterious island in the Caribbean Sea. You play alongside a couple characters from the series such as L, Naomi, and Ray Pember as they help you solve the case, and the game is in the style of a point-and-click mystery game. If you're interested in playing these games, there are English patches of the game posted online. Actually, now that I think about it, do you guys think that Light would kill people that pirate games? Trump is canon. In the A. Kira case, or the 2019 one-shot, a unnamed US president is shown bearing a striking resemblance to Donald Trump, who would have been the current US president given the one-shot takes place around 2017 to 2019. Trump is a part of the world leaders that have a bidding war that takes place for the Death Note, and he eventually wins with a bid of $1 quadrillion. Ryuk goes to Trump to give him the Death Note, but tells Trump about the new rule that if you sell the Death Note, both the seller and buyer will die. Trump then declines the Death Note, but still makes an announcement to the world and lies that he's in possession of the Death Note. Trump says to the world that he will not use it and is just keeping it so that no one evil can use it. He claims to Ryuk that this will make him look like a saint, to which Ryuk points out that it's a clever idea before leaving with the notebook. Simpsons Death Tome. In The Simpsons' 33rd Treehouse of Horrors episode, or episode 6 of season 34, one of the 3 horror parodies is a Death Note parody called Death Tome. The entire segment is animated like the anime, and features a version of Lisa as Light, Moe as Ryuk, and Bart as L. The episode won an Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program, and I won't spoil anymore as you should definitely check it out. I think the whole thing's on YouTube and it's only like 10 minutes long. Death Note: The Killer Within. Death Note: The Killer Within is the newest Death Note video game released in November 2024. The game is an Among Us party-style game that features up to 10 players being split into a Kira team and an L team. You play on different maps as Nier's finger puppets, and you must do tasks and puzzles to deduce who is Kira, or if you're on the Kira side, kill the investigators on the L team. The game's flown a bit under the radar, but it seems to have good reception, and it's only like $10 on every platform, so it seems like a good time if you have people to play with. The 9 Levels of Punishment. Though little is known about who owns authority in the Shinigami realm besides the king, we do know that if a Shinigami breaks one of their realm's laws, then they will have to face one of the 9 levels of punishment. Revealed in the Death Note How to Read guide, the severity of punishment is lowest at level 8 and highest at level 1, and anything above level 3 will result in the Shinigami being killed. There is one more level called the Extreme level, and it's revealed that if a Shinigami kills a human in any manner other than using their Death Note, then the Shinigami will get punished according to the Extreme level. We don't know many of their rules besides the ones we are shown, like a Shinigami prematurely taking someone's life, or a Shinigami acquiring 2 Death Notes, as we know Ryuk was not supposed to have more than 1. So it's pretty interesting to learn more about the Shinigamis in the Shinigami realm, even if it's just something little like this. The Death Note Baby Rule. One of the more obscure rules of the Death Note reads, "The Death Note will not affect those under 780 days old." It's never explained why this is a rule or where that exact number comes from. It makes sense why a Shinigami or Death Note user wouldn't be able to take someone's life so prematurely, but anything older than a 2-year-old is okay? Grimes' Shinigami Eyes. Shinigami Eyes is a song released in 2022 by the well-known electric pop artist Grimes. The song is a direct reference to the Shinigami Eyes from Death Note, with many of the lyrics matching how they work in the anime. Grimes stated that she made the song simply because she liked Death Note and wanted to include it in her music. It would have been cool if she dressed up like Ryuk in the music video. Death Note Wines. Like the Death Note perfumes we talked about earlier, Death Note character wines exist as well. Created in 2020 by Shiraito Sake Brewery, 6 different wines currently exist. A sparkling white wine for Light, 2 sparkling apple ciders for Ryuk, a smooth white wine for L, and a pair of sparkling red and white wines for Mellow and Nier. That L got me moving stupid. L One Day. Released in Japan in January 2008, L The Whammy's House and L One Day were 2 manga chapters that were released alongside a special book for the live-action movie L Changed the World. Both chapters only combine for 12 pages and are narrated by Watsuri as we're shown L grow up in the Whammy house, then some of his more personal day-to-day life as an adult. We also learn through these chapters that L in fact uses the toilet in his sitting position. The 2 chapters were reprinted for the English release of the 2022 short stories book. The Tado Kagami Story. The Tado Kagami Story is a 55-page one-shot chapter that served as the original pilot to the Death Note manga. The chapter follows a 13-year-old boy named Tado Kagami, who, like Light, finds the Death Note outside of his school one day. Taro, not knowing what it is, starts using it as an actual diary and accidentally writes the names of the bullies at his school. After meeting Ryuk and learning more about the notebook, he obtains the Death Eraser, which is an item that allows you to resurrect people whose names have been written in the note. The cut of the Death Eraser from the final series was because Oba felt it was a cheap inclusion to bring back characters from the dead. Ryuk's design stays pretty much the same, and it seems like Taro's design might have been the inspiration behind L's design. The pilot was received well by Shonen Jump, and just 4 months after it was published, the first official chapter of Death Note released. L's Ghost. In the final moments of the Death Note anime, as the credits are rolling, we get to see the world from Light's perspective one last time. Light seems to, in his final moments, hallucinate a vision of L standing over him in a ghost-like fashion. Many fans have tried to interpret what this means, but I think it's symbolic of the fact that even though Light killed him, L still came back in spirit through Nier and Mello to defeat Light. Soulja Boy sample. The rapper Soulja Boy has expressed for years that he's a huge fan of the anime and manga. In his song Long Journey, released in 2010, he samples Nier's theme from the anime for the instrumental. The mixtape that the song comes from is actually called Deathnote, although this is the only song that samples the soundtrack, I believe. Ryuk figure injuries. One of the more popular figures you will see from Deathnote is this Ryuk figure created by ABY Style. This figure is sold in most stores in the States that sell anime merchandising and is pretty massive. The figure is about a foot tall, with most of the height coming from the wings. These large wings are made of hard plastic and are also very pointy and not secured onto the body very well. Some owners of the figure have reported that the wings will break off the figure from their shelves and strike them in the head or neck, injuring them. ABY Style has never had to address these claims yet, but if you own this figure, make sure the wings aren't loose. Madonna's Mellow cosplay. In the music video for Madonna's song Jump, Madonna is wearing an outfit that looks very similar to Mello's iconic outfit from Death Note. The music video was shot in Japan and was created around the same time as Death Note was airing in the US, so it's not too far of a stretch, although it was never confirmed. Nier controlled Mikami. Nier cheating theory, or the Nier controlled Mikami theory, is a theory that states at the end of the story, Nier used Mikami's Death Note to control his actions and get him to approach the warehouse at the Kira confrontation, basically help Light admit to being Kira, then die 10 days later in the hospital after his self-inflicted injury. In chapter 108 of the manga, Matsuda even theorizes this exact scenario, but brushes it off afterwards. I personally don't think that it's really in character for Nier to do this, and I can go into this theory in greater detail, but it would take a while, so maybe it's a topic for another video. One more funny thing about this is, in the Death Note How to Read guide, Oba states Nier is the smartest character in the series because he cheats, which could be him poking fun at the theory. Death Note dress-up games. Since the Death Note anime released around the same time as the peak popularity for Flash games, it wasn't uncommon to see fan-made Flash games using the characters from the anime. One type of Flash game that was very popular was point-and-click dress-up games, and I found a few popular ones that include characters from the Death Note anime. As expected, some of these revolve around dressing up Misa, however there are some silly ones that star Light and L as well. I think these games are very telling of what the internet was like at the time. Deathnote. Deathnote, or Made Deathnote, is an adult film created in 2008 that is a parody of Death Note. It was released in DVD format and has a runtime of an hour and a half. It was a pretty popular joke back in the day to send people the link to this film, claiming that it was the real Death Note anime. I found some pretty sketchy download links that I'm not going to click on, so I can't really learn anything else about this one, but research it at your own discretion, I guess. Banned in all schools. This entry refers to the fact that in almost every school in the world, owning a copy of the Death Note notebook is pretty much banned. There have been several instances of kids purchasing a Death Note or making one, then bringing them to their schools and writing down the names of their classmates and teachers as a prank. This led to the authority in their schools to punish the kids and ban the Death Notes, as they take it as an actual threat. This has happened in every age group as well. I found elementary students, middle school students, and high school students doing the same thing and all getting punished. Just a couple months ago, in September 2024, the I Promise School, which is a school in Akron, Ohio, founded by LeBron James, confiscated a Death Note that was found on the school's property. The Death Note had a list of students and teachers' names with how and when they will die. This caused the school to put out an immediate ban on the notebook, and is a mirror to pretty much how all of these instances go down. How will this affect LeBron's legacy? Lost Tsunami promo. Shout out to SourceBrew and his lost media Iceberg, as I couldn't find much on this entry and his video helped a bit. L Supersonic Q is a lost media YouTuber who uploaded a video where he described pieces of lost media that he remembered watching. One of these pieces was a Toonami promo for Death Note that aired on Adult Swim one night back when the anime was airing in the States. There is a popular video on YouTube claiming to be a Toonami promo, but in reality it's a Adult Swim promo and didn't air on Toonami. There are a couple other videos on YouTube that I found that are promos or bumps as Toonami refers to them, but these don't seem to be the lost promo that LSSQ remembers watching. For now it's still unclear if it's found as LSSQ hasn't made a follow-up on his video, but if anyone finds any old Toonami bumps for Death Note, make sure to post them or send them straight to LSSQ. Belgium I Am Kira murder. The September 2007 I Am Kira murder, also known as the manga murder, is a now solved murder case that took place in a forest in Belgium. One day, two civilians found the mutilated remains of a corpse in the Duden Park forest. After reporting the body, the police could not identify the corpse as all that was left was a torso and two thighs. What the police could deduce was that the body was shaved and stored in a freezer before being placed in the forest, and the victim was a Caucasian male aged between 20 to 30. The police soon after found a note that was left near the body that read, "Watashi wa Kira desu," which is a mistranslation of the phrase, "I am Kira." The police at first thought it was a prank played by medical students who had access to body parts from their schooling, but they later took it more seriously and worried of having a serial killer on the loose. The case went cold for a while as there was little to no evidence left by the killer, but after 3 years in September 2010, 4 men were arrested on suspicion for the murder, with 3 of the men confessing to it. It's still unknown why they left the Kira note after the murder, but it's safe to assume it was just because they are sick and also fans of the series. Light's disturbing name secret. The most disturbing secret in all of the Death Note lore is one that's right under our noses the entire time. Light Yagami's name is harboring something truly spine-chilling. Have you ever thought of what his name was in reverse? Reversing his name reveals, "I'm a gay." Alright, sorry, I had to include one joke entry on the chart. That was the definitive Death Note Iceberg explained. I really enjoy doing these big series-wide icebergs, as it's a ton of fun to ramble about my favorite series. If I got any information wrong or forgot to include something, please let me know in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please consider subscribing and leaving a like if you enjoyed, as it helps me out a ton. That's all from me. Have yourselves a damn good one.